without any further ado, when we started the navigation series, one of the very first people I talked to about this, believe it or not, was Katie Lord. And we communicated about it. I've known Katie probably for about 4 or 5 years now.
Yeah.
Katie, is that about right? Does that sound right?
Right.
That was back when you were a more of a traditional fundraiser.
Yes.
And Katie's fantastic, and I know she has a much bigger LinkedIn profile than I do, and she every week I see something that she's trending on, which I'm both happy for her and jealous of her when that happens. But she's fantastic at operating this digital space, and more importantly, she brings nonprofit context to a really cool business in Kansas City that's called Proof, which is really, meeting nonprofits where they are with the use of data analytics and emotion to help nonprofits continue to improve and enlarge the effectiveness in traditionally a fundraising space. And so without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Katie. I will be here if you have questions during the session for clarification during their talk, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat and communicating with Katie and Grant. They have a presentation that is chock full of valuable information that they'll work through, and then we'll have a kind of a fruitful discussion. But anytime you have questions, just put them up in the chat, and I will make sure we get to them. It's your show, Katie.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting us, Scott. We're so excited to be here. So today we're going to talk about kind of how there's this emerging field of emotional data, and we're going to talk about how you can utilize that with your nonprofits and kind of to create and streamline some of your communication processes to help kind of create deeper relationships with your donors through your marketing and your communications, and to kind of help you succeed in your goals, especially during this time, but after. So here's just a little bit about me. So I've been in fundraising for going on my 13th year now, and have been in the Kansas City region for about 8 years fundraising. And so I am a University of KU grad, so rock chalk, have to get that out there. But I'd also love to introduce you to, and he's going to talk here in a little bit, to my boss, Grant. So Grant Gooding founded our company, Proof. He is actually a UMKC grad, so woohoo. And started out in mergers and acquisitions, and then created Proof kind of by accident. And he'll talk a little bit about that later on, about how he was able to take what he learned in the mergers and acquisition field and really create this new field for emotional resonance, and then how we're bringing that to the nonprofit sector right now in Kansas City and beyond. So, right, so we're going to start off playing a game. So in thinking about why your donors give, I want you to think about, while we're doing this exercise, one word that could describe you in the sector. So take a minute, everyone, write down one word that could describe your organization in the sector and be thinking about it. And I want everyone to unmute for this next exercise. So normally that doesn't happen on our Zoom calls, but I want everyone to unmute as we're going to play this game. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you a word, and you're going to tell me the brand association that comes with that one word in your head. Okay, ready? Let's get going. Okay, online search.
Google.
Yeah.
Google. Great. Expensive coffee.
Starbucks.
Excellent.
Walmart.
Greeting. Oh, I didn't even get part of that. Look at you. That's a hometown advantage. Big burrito.
Chipotle.
Excellent. All right, next set. Low prices.
Walmart.
Online auction.
eBay.
Expensive watch.
Rolex.
Okay.
Online bookstore.
Barnes & Noble.
Amazon.
Barnes & Noble, we got an outlier there. All right. Amazon.
Yeah.
All right. Soft drink.
Coke.
Coke.
Jeans.
Levi's. Levi's.
Affordable airline.
Southwest.
Southwest.
Fried chicken.
KFC.
KFC.
Popeyes.
Okay.
All right, there we
Always
go.
says, and I agree with him. Grant always says we didn't say which was the best chicken for Popeyes. We said fried chicken.
Right.
So there. Okay. So what just happened there?
Great branding.
Great branding. We all thought of the exact same thing. What is the chances of that happening? What do we think are the chances of that happening in a random population? Anyone? Bueller? 0. So I'm going to turn it over to Grant right now, and he's going to kind of walk us through a little bit about why that happened and how we can utilize that with our nonprofits and how the brain is set up to help us create deeper relationships and how we can use emotional data and what it is. So I'm going to turn it over to Grant. Grant?
Well, hello, everyone. So what the exercise you just went through was kind of cheating. So what's interesting about those that set of words that we went through is that they weren't advertising language. It wasn't marketing language. These were simply ideas, right? And in the marketing and positioning space, we call those categories. So what's happened is when there is some kind of a when there's an idea that inserts itself into your brain, it kind of concretes itself in there. So for instance, everyone said affordable airline, but Southwest hasn't been the most affordable airline for over a decade. So how come you said it? And it's not because you're not smart or didn't know that. It's because your brain viscerally creates shortcuts in order for you to understand things. And when it comes to being top of mind, right, when it comes to positioning your nonprofit or being able to increase what Katie has taught me to be your philanthropic priority, being able to have visceral recall like that is kind of cheating. And there's a way that we can look at how the human brain operates and take advantage of some of these very basic neuroscience principles. And it's something that we have done at our company. By the way, I'm the resident nerd here, if you haven't figured that out already. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about some of the basic elements of how the brain's natural processes work. Okay, so go ahead. We'll throw up Jean Piaget up there. So Jean Piaget had a very difficult life. He was desperately obsessed with becoming a male model, and it just never. I'm just kidding. No, Jean Piaget is one of the most important thinkers of our time. He was an epistemologist, which is funny if you think about that being a job, but it actually is someone who studies knowledge. And what he did was he took a lot of philosophical writings and tried to prove them out scientifically, which is really important work. He particularly focused a lot on Immanuel Kant, his work, and he created a few very important things that are critical for us to understand, not only for this, but honestly for our daily lives. Katie, go ahead. One of those things is a schema, and a schema is a shortcut. I was talking about shortcuts. So these are shortcuts that your brain creates in order for you to understand things more simply. So, for instance, I'm sure you've all had times where you were thinking about something and you were maybe driving home from the office or over to a friend's house or something, and the next thing you know, you were just there, and you're like, "Oh man, I was changing lanes and turning at stoplights. And I don't remember any of it." It's because your brain creates schemas around that. It frees it up to do some other things. A schematic marker, on the other hand, is a very significant moment that exists inside of our brain. So if you imagine like a timeline, if you're at a museum or something and you were to see this like giant timeline on the wall of like the history of the United States, for instance, you would see these very significant moments, and those might be like like sort of thick kind of hash marks. But there would also be like ones that were more than significant, like thinner hash marks, right? So maybe the birth of Abraham Lincoln is a thin hash mark, but certainly the death of Abraham Lincoln would be a very thick hash mark, right? Your life follows a very similar kind of parallel. So there are very insignificant moments, and there will be incredibly significant moments, like your wedding day and or the birth of a child or things like that. And you have these incredible memories, and very defined and sharp memories around that, because your brain over indexes how valuable those significant emotional moments are. And the point is that in order to be memorable, you have to be able to generate emotion. And if you can't, your brain will literally cast aside the experiences and the memories that are associated with those experiences. So it's important you understand that that's a very basic thing on how the brain operates. I want you to think about so like if when I have to talk to younger audiences, I have to be like, a file cabinet is a big metal box. So imagine a file cabinet, and you guys can unmute if you think you know the answer. But so if you open a file cabinet, where's the very first place your eyes go?
Tabs.
Top drawer.
Tabs. No, tabs is the correct answer. Whoever got that, if I had a candy bar or something, I'm chucking it at you right now. So what are the kinds of things that are written on tabs inside of, imagine anyone's random desk, right? What are the types of things that are written on tabs?
Names.
Names, what else?
Titles.
Titles, very good. What else?
Categories.
Yeah, category. It's a short list. It's kind of a trick. You're like, I don't know, like the word bills and, like client names and stuff. And what's interesting about that is what you write on there is actually categories. So those things that we with Katie ran you through that exercise, those are the types of things that are written on there. And the point of it is that they need to be very objective. And there are basically two different types of information in that card. There's objective information and subjective information. Objective information is absolutely critical. You have to get this right in your communication. Subjective information are things that everyone will interpret differently, right? So good, love, friendship, all of these colorful adjectives that we're taught to use actually have less impact on the mind regarding memory than objective ideas do. So the challenge is that you have to create and generate emotion in order to be memorable, but you have to do it in an objective way. And the reason is because if you can't objectively communicate yourself, you cannot explicitly hold a position inside of a marketplace, inside your peer group, or inside of the mind of people that you need to pay you money. So let's jump into some real basic decision making. This is also kind of nerdy, but let's look at another smart guy. All right, this guy's name is Antonio Damasio. And he was doing some research at USC, and he's a neuroscientist. He looks like a neuroscientist, doesn't he? I don't know why, like, people, actually, that we didn't even know if that's him. We just Googled neuroscientist, and that's the first image that came up. And so we're like, we're going with it. No, I'm kidding. He was doing some interesting research, and there's some cool details around this I won't jump into because we don't have time, but it's a fascinating story. But essentially what he was able to hypothesize and eventually prove out over a period of 20 years is that there's a few different parts of the brain, right? If you watch an Economist, there's two. There's basically your logic brain and your emotional brain. Your logic brain is your frontal lobe, right? That's where we do complex decision making and we do arithmetic, and some smart people do calculus. I certainly can't. But then there's the emotive brain, which is substantially more complicated. And what he was able to prove out was that that smart part of your brain doesn't even physiologically participate in decision making. Now I'm talking about, and I'm not talking about like what sandwich you're going to pick when you're standing in a line, trying to figure out detail. I mean, like what car you're going to buy, where you're going to go to school, what job you're going to take. All of these decisions go through the amygdala and maintain themselves in the limbic system, and it really only tricks your frontal lobe into thinking that it participates. And the reason for that is your frontal lobe's job is really just to compute options. It has no output capability for decisions at all. So we think about A, we have to make an emotional argument in order to be memorable. B, we have to make sure it's objective, but that if you are trying to make a logical argument, especially with a donor, here's what you're doing. First of all, you're losing your sale right off the bat. You're losing the gift. But best case, so here's your best case scenario if you make a logical argument with someone when you're trying to get them to do something for you, like give you money or purchase something, a ticket or a table. You're slowing them down. That's it. You have enacted this part of the brain that goes, oh, I'll just process those options for a while because this argument is devoid of emotion. So basically all you've done is you've stagnated the sale to a point where you're probably going to end up losing it. So hopefully this all kind of sinks in and makes sense. So the phrase, oh, we're emotional creatures is not only sort of like, sort of philosophically like turn a phrase correct. It's actually mathematically and scientifically correct. Now I think Katie's going to talk to us about differences between our two different styles of data.
Right. So thanks, Grant, and stick around because we're going to do another activity here in a second when I know you've got to jump off for a second, but stick around if you can. Okay. So emotional data. So what is emotional data? It is basically taking the qualitative and the quantitative measurement and putting them into ways that we can create preferences that help explain help explain human behavior and interactions. So that's a mouthful, but what in its core it really means is that emotional data helps us understand human behavior and create positive interactions using what we know motivates people to take action. So big data. I think all of us know that we have big data. We're sitting on mountains of big data in our databases. So big data is extremely large data sets and they reveal patterns and trends. So for example, in our donor databases, a big data would be recency, frequency of our donors. It would be their past giving history. It measures behavior though. So a lot of predictive modeling that you see out in the sector right now is big data. So we're basically measuring based on past behavior of a donor. We think that they're going to do X, Y, and Z. We think that they might give us a gift. We think that they could be ready for a bequest conversation. But what we really don't know about that is any sort of motivation, and behavior can change. It's like going to your favorite coffee shop. There are any number of reasons you walk to that coffee shop. The coffee shop, however, is gathering data every day, and they know that you're gonna come in at 8:15 and order your skinny vanilla latte or whatever it is. They also know on rainy days, for some reason, people are more inclined to have muffins, but they don't know why. They just know, okay, it's a Tuesday, I need to have this many muffins and this many lattes. Oh, and it's supposed to rain tomorrow, I better double that up. So it's really easy to gather this data. It's very, it's indiscriminate. It's what, Amazon and everyone's gathering on us all the time. It measures behavior, but it's really hard to create actionable steps and guidelines just based on behavior alone. Because again, behavior can change. Now, emotional data is kind of almost the opposite or the antithesis, if you will. It's data in a volume that is accessible and incredibly actionable. So it explains the motivations, it explains why you went to that coffee shop. Maybe it's that you like this particular barista and they know you. Maybe it's that it's close to your house. Maybe it's that you like the color of the building. But we can tell you the motivations and preferences of human behavior and interaction, and that's really difficult to gather. It's used for a specific purpose. So it is, why does someone give to you? It is, what is particularly motivating to individual donors in your organization? What program are they most likely to give to? What are they most attached to? And it's very actionable, because if we know what people's motivations are, then we're better able to craft and to serve content that is exactly what people want. So again, kind of big data, easy to gather, indiscriminate, measures behavior. Emotional data is difficult to gather, used for specific purposes, and measures emotions and attitudes, and it's very actionable. So things I want you to think about with that. I'm gonna, if there's anybody here from a animal shelter, I'm gonna pick on you. So I apologize. But so let's think about this. I'm a dog person. I've adopted 2 dogs from local animal shelters and I love them very much. Not a cat person, okay? Why do I give to those shelters? Probably because I got my dog there. However, every year in April, I get cat appeals. And I'm just not a cat person. No matter what you say in that appeal, it is in no way going to get me to open it up. So being able to even know that, to know saying, Katie, it's kitten season in your headline, I'm immediately going to be like, delete. So what can you say to me, or what can you show me that is going to emotionally resonate with me? So I can tell you right now, if you show me if you show me puppies and kids, I'm going to write you checks all day. So show me those kids reading to puppies. And that's something that I emotionally resonate with, but that's something we can also get down to the minutia within an organization. So big data helps answer who, what, where, when, and how, but not the why. Emotional data answers the why. So we can get very far with our organizations with big data, but think about how we can get even further with emotional data, which is the why. So I'm sure a lot of people use Donor Search or Wealth Engine or iWave. All of those are the who, what, where, when, and that is, again, aggregated big data. It shows you based on past giving behavior what someone might be inclined to give to, but it doesn't show exactly why someone might make a leap from an organization that they've already given to your organization. And again, that's where emotional data really comes in, even if you're in the same line of the nonprofit sector. So we have found, we've done several organizations and including domestic violence shelters, but why someone gives to one shelter is completely different than why they give to another shelter, even though you would in your mind think, well, we do the same thing, but it's not, because there's some sort of emotional resonance and difference between those organizations, and the value propositions and what you say to your donors resonates completely differently, which is why it's really important to understand why someone might give to you over another organization, or why they might give to you in collaboration with another organization. So a case study, I'm going to turn this, Grant, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about our case study and to kind of walk through this next exercise. We don't have the tree graphic, but I can send that out to everyone. But I want you to start kind of thinking about how this could relate to your organization.
Yeah, we put this in as a because it's a pretty serious challenge, and it's an important thing to get right, and it's a lot harder than you might think. What we have found is that, and I would love to say that like we thought of this, but we really didn't. A guy named Al Reese thought of this about 20 years ago. And what he discovered was that brand identity and how organizations are positioned in the market actually diverge and not converge. Similar to how like sort of species diverge, but don't converge. And so what we've seen is that there is sort of a direct correlation that exists between focus and value. And this is true of any organization, for-profit, nonprofit, it doesn't really matter. And what that means is the less that you do, essentially, the more you're worth. It's a natural human instinct to increase the breadth of what you do because you believe that you are going to be providing more value. It also falsely gives you gives you an assumption sort of that you're going to be able to collect more checks if you increase the breadth of your organization. And what we found over time is that this actually is not true. The more narrow your focus, the more valuable you are. And it is really it's a compounding effect as well. All of those organizations that we showed you at the beginning of this have all done that, right? They stand for a very simple idea. Some of them have increased their breadth, like Starbucks, for instance. Starbucks created a place to drink coffee. And then once they dominated the market, they put in drive-through windows, which is sort of a tactic that's completely counterintuitive to the entire reason that they were successful. once you get there, you can do whatever you want. Starbucks had come out with a pair of running shoes and people would buy them. But getting to the point of success and holding that position inside people's minds is absolutely hard to do. And so this is intended to do that. So I want you to think about a tree. So look at the trunk of a tree, and whatever the trunk of your tree is well, it is what it is, right? So it's whatever sort of sector that you're in. We use the example here of like sort of human health being that, and then off of the trunk of the tree, there's going to be a branch, right? And that branch might be, well, human health, but diseases. And then, well, there's any number of diseases. All right, we pick cancer, right? And then maybe we pick breast cancer. So what we've done is the trunk is human health, the branch is disease-based charities, the limb is cancer, and the leaf, which we talk about the leaf as being important because the leaf is where your dollars come in. We always say leaf is new money. You want to find as many leaves as possible. It's really hard to take money away from other people, but it's really easy to give, to create a new idea and have people give for the first time to a new idea. So anyway, so like for instance, like, you know, we're using this example, obviously what nonprofit are we talking about in this example?
Susan Komen.
Susan Komen, right? Why do they own it? Do they do the best job? I mean, they own that, pretty much everybody said, but do they do the best job? Do they have the best 990? I mean, all of the metrics of success are sort of not wildly relevant when it comes to giving, because we're not using our logic brain, we're using our emotive brain. So I want you to think about, what are these things to you? And if you cannot do this, if you can't write these down and say, yes, I know this is my trunk, I know this is probably the branch that we're on, this is our limb. And if you look at your new leaf and say, well, this is what our leaf is. And so if you can get to that point, but then you ask yourself, all right, well, how many other organizations could make that exact same claim? And if you're not the only one, you're in trouble. That means you're losing share of wallet. That means you're losing dollars. And you're actually hurting not only yourself, but you're sort of hurting the other organizations that are in your space. To be as narrowly focused as possible benefits everybody. It benefits you, it benefits your sort of like competitors, like in the sector. Everyone really wins. And it allows you to create stronger, more emotional connections with people that are more aligned with your particular cause, right? So anyway, this is a great exercise. And if you want, print this off or take a screenshot or just kind of write it down.
The chat here in a minute.
Yeah, and if you want to chat for a second, I can hang on for a little bit, and I'm sorry, I have to jump on another. I have to jump.
Do we have anyone, real quick before Grant goes, and then we can answer questions? Do we have anyone who wants to do this exercise?
And you can email us later if you want, if you have questions on it. We get people that email us like months later on stuff. So you're more than welcome to do that. We'll be happy to help.
Do we have any brave souls?
Yeah, anybody want to volunteer their nonprofit to run through 1 through 4 real quick? You put your hand up or unmute yourself. Something economics.
Economics.
I'm happy to guinea pig if it's helpful.
Great.
Yay, Jeanette. All right.
You're up,
Okay.
Jeanette.
Okay, so you want to just, so starting at the trunk,
Yes.
my organization, Hope International, is about faith-based micro-enterprise. Kind of a mouthful. I could say that in more translated, but, and then our branch is, I would say, our branches, because can I have a few?
Actually, I think that you're probably jumping ahead, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, which is good news, right? So that's actually a pretty nice position, at least on its face to me, not being totally familiar. So like faith-based would be a reasonable trunk, right? So like a faith-based organization might be a trunk. So then a branch
Okay.
might be, well, actually, I'm not even 100% sure what you mean by micro enterprise.
Yeah. So business, so it's access to capital alongside business coaching.
Okay.
Okay.
So it's kind of like you help start and launch startups in the faith-based space.
In the developing world, so it's actually so it's a little complicated because we serve people no matter, if they have a faith-based or not. So our clients are broad ranging. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, essentially we help people launch micro businesses in places where conventional banks are not serving them.
You're more teach to fish instead of give a fish.
Yeah, for sure. Or maybe own the pond, really.
Is this, how much domestically do you do?
Nothing. We do nothing in the States.
Okay. I was going to say, because that lends to a lot of like South American, in particular, South American, we've done some work on with microfunding and stuff like that. Okay, so the fact that you are faith-based is an irrelevant variable to the outside end user, correct?
Yeah, help me think it through, because the way we think about poverty is really multifaceted. So part of the faith-based component is people like not only having access to capital, like a material financial domain, but also access to community and so there's a social capital, access to their own dignity. So there's like,
I want you to think about something.
yeah.
There are ways that we communicate what it is that we do, how we do, and why we do it, that are absolutely critical to the outside world, and some that are just a part of who we are. All those big brands I showed you, how many of those are faith-based? Do you know?
I don't know. I mean,
I don't know either, because there's only a few that wear them on, but I bet you a few of them have very strong.
Yeah, okay, that's a great point, Grant. Yeah, so maybe, I mean, probably like, I do think probably micro enterprise is maybe the brand or the trunk.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Well, it could be more like sort of funding, right? Or is it, somebody just brought up, sorry, Phyllis, I just saw
Phyllis said poverty work. Is that the trunk?
Okay, well, yeah, poverty alleviation or human flourishing, something like.
Yeah. By the way, one of the, Katie told
Dang,
me.
this is harder than I thought it was.
I told you it was hard.
Exercise. It's a good exercise for everyone to be kind of thinking about. And we'll send this out. I'll send this out to Scott, and I'll see if I can put this in the link.
Great.
But yeah, so it's a really good exercise for your organization to sit down and maybe do together as senior staff, but then also as a board exercise as well, to really help you understand what is your objective argument that we can turn into an emotional pull.
Yeah. Once you have this laid out, the rest of the communications, the organization will actually get quite a bit easier.
So this is a good clarification point, because I'm sure this isn't, Christy Wells isn't the only one with this. What is the branch again? So the trunk is kind of, what is that? I'm an economist, right? So that's like the core value proposition or core area of work. What is the branch again?
Oh, sorry, I was reading chats. Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Oh,
Grant or Katie.
Yeah.
Well, how would you define the branch? How would you define the branch?
Okay, well, think about it this way. So, there's an example that we use a lot where we talk about lawyers, which we don't want to do because they're lawyers. And that generates negative emotional stimulus. So, but I think like all organizations literally sprout from the ground, kind of like just like a tree would grow, right? So you have a sapling that comes out of the ground, and if it's going to work, then it grows. And in that instance, it's law, right? The practice of law. Well, organically, naturally, over time, there have been little differentiated areas of law that have kind of come off of there. It's bankruptcy law and criminal law and divorce law and estate planning law. And inside of those, there are little micro specialties that kind of come off of those branches into limbs, and that's how you see. It's an interesting segment because it grows almost exclusively through mergers and acquisitions, because the lawyers are terrible creatives and they can't make simple arguments like, I am an estate planning attorney for people that own golf courses, which would be an insanely profitable law firm if someone created it, but no one has the bravery, right, to create something that specific.
So like if we did use like health in the nonprofit sector, you take like the FQHC space, right? The federally qualified health centers like Sam Rogers and Swope and Vibrant, that, you know, their trunk is their healthcare, right? Institutions, their healthcare providers, but it sounds like their branch might be the FQHC space in particular, right? They're looking specifically for clients. They're looking specifically for people on Medicaid and Medicare.
Yeah, you have to think about this as far as like, what is it that you do and who are.
It's kind of the subcategory of like the larger one. I think Grant froze there for a second. So again, kind of taking it back to animal shelters, let's think about that. So animal shelters, then you could be an animal shelter that serves dogs. Well, we serve dogs, but what kind of dogs? Pit bulls. And we serve pit bulls that have been rescued from fight rings. So that's so it can be so when you're thinking about it, it's kind of broad categories that kind of take you one level deeper, if you will, into a specialty of the nonprofit sector. So when you're thinking of that overall, so yes, so for health, it would be health. And then I would almost say that it would be clinics next, because health is huge. So I would say their trunk would be health. Then they would be more of a, you know, clinic-based health center.
A provider.
Yes. Then I would go FQHC.
Would be their limb.
Would be the limb, and then their leaf would be, okay, what do they specifically provide that differentiates them in the marketplace? So maybe it's that they have the eye clinic, maybe it's their dentistry, maybe it's their, you know, they serve bilingual populations.
Yeah, like, so you look at Sam Rogers, they speak 27 different languages there, right? So now we're at the leaf.
Right.
Great.
Excellent.
Yeah, there's some good stuff coming in. Are you two ready to hear
We're
some
ready.
of
We're ready. I think Grant's gonna have to jump off for a minute.
Oh, I'm sorry, everybody. I'm getting beat up here. Hey, I love hanging out with everybody. Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful week.
And if
And
there's something that I can't answer, Grant and I will get back to you. So yes, we're ready for questions.
Let's hit. Lauren had a couple parking lot questions earlier,
Great.
and I think this is pretty at the kind of 20,000 foot level, but I think it's a good place to start. What kind of balance do you look for when trying to join empirical impact data and emotional response when talking to funders?
What kind of response do you look for?
What kind of balance are you looking for between the empirical? You guys talked about the big data versus the emotional data. How do you balance those two when you're?
That's a really great question. So what I would say is this: institutions are still made up of people. So while we understand when we're talking to funders what their focus might be as far as, you know, this is our funding areas, these are our priorities, but again, we're still talking to people, and institutions and corporations, we believe at Proof are people. They have their own personalities. So you really do need to focus a lot on the emotions and the interests of your program officer as well. That could, in theory, differentiate whether or not, when, you know, push comes to shove and they're having their board meetings, how individuals advocate for your organization if they can clearly define in emotional terms to others what you do. So it's a very strong balance, but I would also say it's who, what, where, when, but it's why. Really, people give to why, not necessarily who, what, where, when, how.
Great. Fantastic. just go ahead and write any questions you have in the chat, and we will make sure we get to them. Another question that kind of predated this conversation that Lauren put out there, and I thought it was good for everybody, relates to what kind of tools can we use to determine how we talk to potential funders? So this is a big one in the marketing space, right? Like personas, empathy maps, anything like that. Do you have any tools in particular that you like or that you've heard of that would be good in this space?
You know, what I would say is this. You know, we use surveys, and we survey people's donors sphere, if you will. You need to be tracking all the analytics that come from your donors. So you need to be looking at, you know, who liked what message happened, but you also do need to be surveying your donors. I know that we sometimes think, okay, a survey, great, but it really does help understand what people are giving to and what is resonating. You need to be looking at open rates all the time. For any email that you send, you need to be going and seeing not only how much was opened, you need to be taking it a step deeper and going, who opened this one? Who clicked through this one? Why did that, you know, and we can start making inferences from that information. I just posted something the other day about like slacktivism. We need to be looking at what's trending and what's not trending. We do need to be looking at, well, we were just kind of talking about, you know, do likes matter? Likes are the gateway to a beginning of a conversation, right? So there's a lot of noise on Facebook and Instagram. So for me to pause and to see something and to take a moment to like it, I could just keep scrolling. So there's something about that message that caused me to pause. So we really do need to be looking at those analytics, and we also need to be repurposing content. I think something that, you know, I love from the sector, but also I think sometimes we create the wheel much more than we need to. If we can go back and see what has performed well, we can repackage that in many ways and put it on different mediums. And people, again, people need to hear the same message. You know, it used to be 7 times. I think it's up to, you know, 10 or 12 times now before they're going to take some sort of action. So you're not really repeating yourself. It's almost like seeing a new message before somebody's going to take that action. So really look into the analytics. I know sometimes we just take a kind of a quick glance at, you know, who's clicking through what, but you need to be really taking a deep dive into those at least once a week and aggregating that data into a fuller picture of what communications are meaningful. So there's a lot of analytics tools that are out there. There's Google Analytics and you know, you should really just even start there and go deeper.
Other questions? You know, there was several comments that were floating around about the tree. Can you put the tree back up, Katie?
I can put the tree back up, and I will send this out. So here's the tree.
So can you walk back through the definition, like your kind of working definitions of trunk, branch, limb, and new leaves? Because that was one of the things I think Phyllis said.
So the trunk is really the largest net that you cast, if you will. It is the largest definition of where you fit into the sector. So
have you done this with proof?
Have we done this with proof?
Yes.
I don't know if we have. Not since I've been here, but I'm sure we have. So, you know, I guess an example with us would be, so proof. I would say for the trunk, we would be market research. So our trunk would be market research.
Great.
Our branch would be emotional data. So we would be market research. Our branch, we have 2, but for this one, we're going to do, for branch, we're going to say nonprofits. So market research, nonprofits. A limb would be feasibility studies. And then our new leaves would be capital campaigns, or it could be a program expansion. It could be, you know, kind of any rebranding.
Great.
anything like that is how we could look at proof. And then we could do that for our other business line. We could do that for corporate. So if you have multiple lines, you can also do this for multiple programs, if you will, or multiple services. But also know that there's going to be one or two that are overarching what you can own the space in, if you will, versus some that are, you know, for example, you might have 2 or 3 programs, but one program is really the driver of your organization. That will be the one that you'll want to focus on the most, but it's good to do this for all 3 programs. So when you're talking about them, you can create some objectivity in the market.
That's really helpful, right? So just like a tree, right? You only have one trunk, but once you get past that, you can have multiple branches, limbs, and leaves.
Right. And so thinking about it too, it's kind of being a generalist or a specialist. What are you a specialist at? Start out at the generalist, look at the trunk as your general, and then your leaf is what you are really special at.
Great. Jeanette asked a question about, she was curious about if there's a baseline segmentation scaffolding. That's a mouthful, that they might want to keep in mind.
So for baseline segmentation, so with what we do here at Proof, it's mostly really targeted. So every organization segmentation can be completely different for what it looks like. What I would say is if you're just looking at starting out, just, baseline segmentation, you need to look at, I would say you need to look at, if they're an annual donor, you need to look at recency and frequency, and you need to look at donor levels. Don't look at donor levels as, I think we need to look at donor levels differently. So you can split them 2 ways. You can look at them as, what do they normally give? Or you can look at lifetime value. I think we really need to be looking at lifetime value more than what we are right now. So if someone's giving $100, a year, but maybe they've given for the past 10 years, they're $1,000 donor. We need to be thinking about that differently. So easy demographics that you can always do are age, you can do giving history, you can do how they give. So do they give through the internet, or are they still direct mail? What do they respond to best? Those are some really basic ones that you could start with that I think are a really good starting ground if you're going to segment. If you can get down to program, again, just a little bit of digging in your donor data can tell you if they're a dog or cat person, or if they want to give to adult literacy or child literacy, or if they want to give to, feeding the homeless versus housing the homeless. So you can take some of these segmentations and start just serving up people content that they've reacted to in the past. That's a little bit of like a 1 layer deeper that I would really suggest that you take some time to go and see what people have responded to individually. Now, if they're all over the map, there are going to be some that just love you. And so those I would almost put in as like your superstar passionate supporters, you can do no wrong. That would even be your own, a different segmentation. But start segmenting just on some basic demographics. And giving histories is where I would start if you're going to start segmenting donors. But definitely start segmenting donors. I promise it will pay off. You will be amazed at just how simple segmentation can really increase donor engagement and retention.
Fantastic. So we're getting pretty close to the end of our hour. We have time for another question or two. If anybody has anything outstanding. The good news is Katie's not leaving Kansas City anytime soon. Yeah. And Grant is not either, I assume. No. Today's the first time I've met Grant.
Yep.
So we can do deeper dives in some of these contents in future sessions. We were excited to give kind of an introduction to this way of thinking, kind of orienting your minds as executives to this. From Amanda George, do you have a quick application for a governmental organization?
Ooh, a quick application for governmental organizations.
So Amanda, I know because Amanda and I have gotten to work together for years. Okay. She's fantastic. Works at ETOS, which is a Jackson County entity.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's going to be an offline one because I have a lot of questions. I'm familiar with ETOS, but there's a lot of different ways that we could go. So Amanda, if you want to, my email is just right here. It should be right there. It's not, but it's katie.lord@proofpositioning. If you want to shoot me an email, I will be happy to get back with you, and Grant and I can actually walk through that kind of exercise with you. We're happy to do that.
And then you're now being requested for board of directors retreats also. So,
yes, we're happy to do that. Grant and I love talking to boards because we can, what we like about that is everyone's super emotional, and we can bring some data that will take the emotion right out of it and kind of prove some points. So yeah, I'm also on LinkedIn. Feel free to, reach out and I'll get back to you. But thank you so much to Scott and the center. They're doing amazing things.